Congratulations, Coach Smart, on making it back to that championship. How were you able to prepare for this time around, preparing for the national championship, and also what did you learn about your team this year, coming into this season, and how you guys were able to grow into this point?
Well, we learned about a lot about our team. It's one of those things every year you do, right? The journey is what we do this for, and we've come a long way since this time last year. I think about this time last year, who we were and who we are now. It couldn't be further from the same team. Just very different mental makeup, very different physical makeup, very different path to get here. But the journey is what it's about, and these guys have done everything we've asked. I've just been so pleased with the mental makeup and the character of this team. They've embodied everything we've asked them to do. And it's funny now because you start making plans for next year of what you're going to do when we get back and when you got to start workouts. And we were doing the same thing this time last year and had no clue that we would be at this point.
Kirby, a couple of things about recruiting. I know you're going to go after the best players in the country, but because you have such a good recruiting footprint around you, is there something strategic about your decision to reach into a Texas or an AD or reach out to Brock Bowers? Is it more than just they're the best players?
Well, I mean, nobody really wanted A.D. Mitchell. I mean, A.D. Mitchell didn't have an offer. A.D. Mitchell was more of a workout tape that he kept sending us. And he's a unique situation. He's very different than Brock because, Brock was recruited nationally and really high thought of. But every situation is different. Our footprint is really good. When you look at the MVPs of our last game, Stetson Bennett and Javon Bullard, neither were very highly recruited in-state players who were good high school football players. You look at Ladd McConkey, he's an in-state kid that wasn't highly recruited. So our footprint is what our footprint is. We go after the players we think fit our culture, and that's more important than maybe where they're from.
Just one quick follow-up on that. We hear about Georgia's highly rated recruits in a developmental program that is like TCU. Aren't all programs developmental programs?
Yeah, and don't all programs also recruit? I mean, I think it's the truth lies somewhere in the middle. It's a narrative that gets put out there, but I talk to our players about it all the time. Our best players on our team are not our most highly rated players. We've got 4 or 5 guys that were not. I mean, they're really good football players, and TCU has a team full of really good football players. And I watch those guys play, and the way they play is so much more important than who wanted them out of high school. I mean, who cares? Our players respect football players, and they respect the football players on our team, whether they were a 2 or 3 star, and they respect the players on TCU's team, whether they were.
Hi, Coach Smart. You guys lost 15 players to the draft and 13 in the transfer portal last season. Which player has stuck with the most this year after losing a large pool of players?
There's no way I could name one. That's impossible to single out one guy. I think a lot of the guys that contributed last year improved. I mean, they got better, so they made themselves better. And then a lot of guys who didn't contribute at all contributed this year. I mean, that guy over there got better, but he was a major factor last year. Kenny McIntosh, to me, was a major factor last year, but he got better. There's a lot of guys that played last year that got better, but there's even more that didn't play that put themselves in a situation to be helpful for our program. Yeah, I mean, we're hopeful they're going to be able to play. I mean, that's really all I can say. We haven't done much since then, So since we've been at home, so I'm hopeful those guys are able to play and help us, and those guys want to play. I can promise you that.
How much more difficult has it got to coach defense with each season? I mean, we saw the high-scoring semifinals, and you being a defensive guy, does it frustrate you when you see scores like that in the semifinal setting?
Yeah, I don't know if frustrate is the right adjective, but it's something along those lines. You feel, okay, when is good defense going to be played in a semifinal or a final, for that matter? I mean, I don't know. football has evolved to where offenses are definitely ahead of defenses. It just seems to expose itself more towards the end of the year. And I don't know if anybody can put a fingerprint on it. I'm not trying to put a fingerprint on it right now, trying to stop the next play and trying to score on the next play on offense. But I don't, I think it is a thing. I just don't know what causes it or what allows it. But conditioning levels may have something to do with that. And, offenses have been ahead of defenses, so you've seen a lot of high-scoring games.
Hey, Coach, with the entire football community being affected by the DeMar Hamlin injury, what were your initial thoughts on it, and have you addressed it with the team about it?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I have children who play sports, and that injury happens actually in hockey and baseball probably more often than football, but it scares me. Thank goodness we have Ron Corson, who is almost a 30-year athletic trainer, and he was an athletic trainer for me, and he immediately reached out to me. We were in studying, watching tape, getting ready for TCU, and he reached out and told me and said we need to address it with our team. So the very next morning, first thing we did is we brought in a mental health specialist, we brought in an athletic trainer, we brought in a team chaplain, and we prayed. We also addressed it from a mental health standpoint. And then Ron educated players on exactly what happened and how rare, but it can happen, and you have to have people in place to save lives. And what an incredible job they did on the scene to make sure that he has an opportunity to recover from it. So the education piece was important to us to ensure our players that safety measures are there.
The last question, when he came to, his first words were, "If we win." Now, is that something that you can use as a motivational factor going into Monday, seeing what this player, what his teammates mean to him?
Yeah, I don't think we'll use that as the motivating factor, but just his health alone is a great sign, and certainly happy for him and his family.
Thank you, Coach.
You're a perfect one to ask detailed questions. Harder to get there, harder to maintain.
It's hard both. There's nothing easy about winning football, successful football programs, and it's harder than it's ever been to maintain, and it's harder than it's ever been to get there. I mean, it's just the culture with all the things on the outside that we deal with now. It's harder than it's ever been, and it's why you see shorter coaching careers. You see coaches with the ability financially to step out because they don't love it. You see a lot of different things, but I can't say whether one's easier than the others. You don't do comparisons in that regard. They're both really hard in their own right. And sustaining, maintaining versus achieving and climbing the mountain, both difficult.
I talked to Brett Perry yesterday. She remembers about the interview. You were well prepared on this. This was going to be the opportunity of your life.
Yeah, I don't remember much. It was, I knew Greg. I knew a lot of people at Georgia. I knew President Moorhead. I'd had a class with him, so it was a situation that I had prepared for a long time. But I don't feel like the decision was going to hinge on an interview. It wasn't going to be one of those. Do you answer it wrong? They wouldn't have been talking to me if they weren't interested. I was really consumed with my position I was in and making sure I did it right for the players where I was working, because that's so important to me that you don't put your career ahead of your team's.
Kirby, 20, 30 years from now, when you're at golf with your buddies, asking about Stetson and its legacy in the program, what would you tell them?
Well, I got a long story to tell. I can assure you that. You think about the things that he and I have been through, decisions made. From the recruitment process to his official visit to what'll happen Monday night. Where to begin? It'll be a long round of golf because there's a lot of history there for he and I, and just appreciative of the way he's handled everything and really what he stands for.
Coach, how you doing this morning?
Great.
What's the vibe with the team
Well, it's the same thing it does in every football game. You know, who can control the line of scrimmage, who can be explosive, who doesn't turn the ball over. I mean, the game never changes, right? You just have more cameras here. You got more people viewing, bigger stage, a lot further away from home. But football's football, and our guys prepare for that really all year. So we got to go play a really, really good football team, and we'll have to play one of our best games of the year to be able to beat them.
Kind of random. Have y'all used the word repeat around the building at all? Have y'all said it?
Nah, we don't. I mean, it's never about that. I mean, we've never said repeat or defend. We hunt, and that's simple for us. We want to stay on the aggressive side of things. And again, I've just been a part of too many years where I came off a win that wasn't the narrative. You know, this team is not that team, and next year's team won't be this year's team. So they're completely independent of each other, just like every game is independent of the previous. We don't dwell in the rearview mirror. You know, we try to focus on what's ahead.
What do you recall about that? And can you speak to just the way his aura is going to hang over the sport?
Yeah, he was at Valdosta State, and my dad was a high school coach. So we were about an hour and a half where I grew up from the program he was at. And there were a lot of kids that went from my high school, my dad coached, that went and played at Valdosta State. So it was kind of the cradle of coaches at the time. A lot of coaches had come through there, and they did recruit me. He didn't personally recruit me, but his staff, the staff there, I was a defensive player. He was an offensive coach. So, you know, they had a tremendous staff. But my experiences with Coach Leach were just different. I mean, we played him the COVID year, and nobody warned me that before the game when you went and talked to him that he would talk, and he would talk, and he would talk. And I got worried because, you know, you got time limits to what you got to go do pregame. And I couldn't break away from the conversation. I mean, we had run out of time. I had to go be with our team, and I'm like, I got to go, and this guy's still going. And so then this year, I was a little more prepared, and I thought, okay, I'm going to have my time allotted with him and get away. And I found myself again, I couldn't get away. And he was talking about his South Florida place where he goes and how he's going to go down there after the season. And I kept looking at the clock going, I can't get away from this guy. He's unbelievable in his ability to carry a conversation and just talk about anything. But I really have enjoyed all the stories that come up. I've read all over social media where people talk about their experiences, interactions with him, and to read all the different ones is really cool.
Kirby, I'm just curious, as you look back over your tenure at Georgia, how did you get to the point where you said, this is what I want our offense to be, this is what I want it to look like, how explosive I want it to be?
I don't know that I completely define that. You know, that's an area that you do based on who you have on your team. So, like, when you have Nick Chubb and Sony, who I think are two first-round backs, you might look different than when you have Brock Bowers, Oscar Delp, Darnell Washington tight ends, and then you got wideouts. You know, so like we've evolved to fit who we have on offense. Do you have to be explosive? Yes. But everybody's explosive different ways. You know, LSU was one of the most explosive teams I've ever played in 2019, and they were different than us. Alabama, the year they had the 4 or 5 first-round wideouts, they were explosive in a different way than LSU. So everybody has their way of being explosive, and that kind of evolves based on how your offensive coordinator wants it to. And our guy, Coach Muckin, does a tremendous job.
It's kind of a two-parter. You've been a coach for a really long time, been around some really great coaches. How much do you lean on that advice and that experience in such moments like this? And then what coach gave you the best advice and what was it?
I rely on all the coaches that I've worked with. I think we all plagiarize. I certainly give a lot of credit to my father, who was my first coach, and I grew up under his tutelage, and he meant a lot to me as a coach. And then Coach Bowden impacted me a lot, Coach Chris Hatcher, Coach Richt, and then I was probably with Coach Saban the longest. I think you learn different things from different people, and I learned a lot from each one. So the impact has kind of made me who I am, and now you can't stop learning. You never, when you're green, you grow, and you're ripe, you're right. So you never want to be right. To me, I'm learning from my coaches. And when you bring new coaches in, you're able to gain things from them, maybe how they do things, or you go to other schools and you study how they do things. I'm infatuated with some schools across the country that I think do an incredible job, and you always want to go visit them to see how they do it, just to make sure you keep getting better.